Shabbat Shalom. In this week's Parsha, Parshat Haazinu, I personally find a double commandment. The Haazinu, we are told, Zechoyemot Olam, Binu Shnot Dor V'Dor. Not only to remember our history, but to investigate it, to consider it, to contemplate it. Binu Shnot Dor V'Dor. As a professional historian, I take that in a very personal sense. And then the Torah goes on to say, Sha'al avicha v'yagedcha, zekenecha v'yomru lach. If you want to know about what's happened over the course of history to the Jewish people, ask your parents, ask your elders. And since I'm now pushing 70, I think I count as one of the zekenim. And so again, I have an obligation to offer what I know, what I've seen to those who are younger than I. Now, the Haazinu has a prediction concerning the Jews abandoning the Torah, not obeying the Torah, not considering the Torah to be normative and binding, and suffering a terrific punishment as a result. And in fact, it's the third, at least the third, in a series of tochichot, of dire warnings that we have at the end of Sefer Devarim. But what's interesting is that these tochichot all end differently. In Kitavo, which has the longest one, it ends on a very pessimistic note. We will be sent back to Egypt in boats, and that's it. Elu Devrei Brit. Almost no hope. In Tzvim, it's quite the opposite. Not only will we do tshuva and will God return to us, but the prosperity we had enjoyed will not only be returned, but will be increased. So we'll come back eventually to a much better situation than before we received the divine retribution. In Haazinu, we have a third story. Again, the Jews do not obey the Torah. The Jews suffer very severe punishment, again described in lyrical terms that are quite frightening. And then the Torah tells us that God will save us not because we deserve it, not because we've done tshuva, but to preserve his own honor, because the nations that have attacked us and inflicted such punishment upon us will start to have it, it'll go to their head, and they'll start thinking that their great success against Israel is due to their prowess. Pen Yomru Yodenu Rama. Lest they say that our hand is high. And so for that reason, God will give them their due, and they'll be destroyed, and we'll be saved. Now, what are we supposed to take from this? Take away from these this set of warnings and predictions? Well, I'll have a few thoughts of that in a minute, but first I want to say something about observing the Torah, obeying the Torah. For over a century, there has been a trend among certain groups within the Jewish people of saying that the law, the Judaism of the Torah is not nice. It's not pleasant. It's not friendly. It's full of capital punishment for all sorts of inflictions, all sorts of infractions. Some of which are now considered to be perfectly normal behavior, and it reminds me their views remind me of what George Orwell, the great writer who not many people know was also a very fierce anti-Semite, who once said, if you want to understand anti-Semitism, read the Old Testament. You'll see why people hate the Jews. So instead, this group of Jews say, no, we like the religion of the prophets, because they're talking about social justice and helping the poor and underprivileged. Well, that's not quite the whole story. Yes, it's true that the prophets say that those people who oppress the poor and yet go to perform all the rituals and offer sacrifices, thinking that that's going to get them some sort of credit with Kadosh Baruch Hu, they're wrong. And when people who act so meanly and so wickedly towards the poor, go and offer great sacrifices in the temple, that's disgusting. But they never said that it's in place of observing the Torah, the laws of the Torah, the strict laws of the Torah. For example, in the wonderful Haftorah, which we read on Yom Kippur just a short time ago, again, the Navi Yeshayahu, yes, he says, I don't like the fast days of people who fast because they think they're gaining credit with God, which they will then spend to hit their enemies in the face. Instead, the fast, instead of that, what God wants is, feed the poor, feed the hungry, and clothe the naked. Yes, these are very important Jewish values, and no one should belittle them. And I'm very glad to see how they are put in practice in my community here and around the world in Jewish communities. But it's not all. God is not the same Haftorah that we read in Yom Kippur ends with a tremendous emphasis on Shmirat Shabbat, observing the Sabbath, where the prophet says Im tashiv mishabat raglecha asot chavatzecha b'yom kadshi. No public transportation in Shabbat. Tashiv mishabat raglecha asot chavatzecha b'yom kadshi. No businesses open on Shabbat. V'krat Shabbat oneg. Yes, it's a day to be enjoyed, but it's l'kdosh Hashem mechubad. We shouldn't try to have some sort of Judaism that's godless, that it's simply a day of fun and picnics and everyone having a great time and slapping each other on the back and trading jokes and gobbling down food. No, the Kdosh Hashem Mechubad. It's a day in service of a Kadosh Baruch Hu, a day from refraining from work, of refraining from public transportation, which some evil people are trying to institute in Tel Aviv. And the observance of the Torah includes strict observance of the Shabbat, and there's no way around it. That's what I'm telling you as an old man. Now, what are we supposed to do with all of this? Well, I think in the end, with the Jewish people hearing all these dire predictions and all these different endings, as I said, went back to the famous event at Har Sinai after Moshe broke the tablets, and Kadosh Baruch Hu was Kivyachol threatening to wipe out the Jewish people, and Moshe successfully, again according to the Pshat of the Pesukim, successfully intervened. Moshe made 2 points to Kadosh Baruch Hu. He said, Lama yomu Mitzrayim le'mor bara utziam. If you destroy the Jewish people, then God will, the people will dismiss the whole miracle of taking us out of Egypt, which recalls in some sense Penyamu Yadenu Rama, that the nations will misinterpret this great historical event and miss the great miracle that God performed for the Jewish people. And then he said, Zechor li'Avraham li'Yitzchak li'Yisrael avadecha. Recall our forefathers. And I think because this, according to the Torah, was a successful intervention, these 2 points have been made repeatedly in Jewish prayer for thousands of years, especially the second one. We are still living off of the great zechut, the great credit that Avram Avinu has for spreading monotheism on his own, discovering it on his own, building a community, obeying a moral law, and worshiping the one God. And we are drawing upon this zechut generation after generation. And it looks, we're hopeful that this zechut will never be depleted. And so these are the 2 points that are repeated over and over again in Jewish prayer, and we should keep it in mind, especially as soon we will begin Sefer Devarim, Sefer Bereshit, and reading about Avram Avinu to appreciate the tremendous, almost incomprehensible accomplishment that he made, and from which we draw our sustenance, almost our survival to this day. Thank you very much, and Shabbat Shalom.